Well, good evening, everybody. My name is John Heister. I'm the Executive Director at Breakthrough Silicon Valley, and we're going to get started on time because we have an action-packed agenda for the panel tonight. We're really happy that this has been so interesting to so many of you, and we're again excited for the evening. So I want to welcome you to this event where it's part of our Breakthroughs in Education series. So periodically we'll be offering these kinds of engagements to help our broader community learn more about the work that we do. I see, looking through the participants list, a lot of people that we know and love. Welcome back. We're so glad to have you. And a lot of new names. And I was just notified my video's not on. Thank you, Adele. A lot of new names as well. So welcome to all of you who are new to Breakthrough. I want to just spend a minute or two talking about Breakthrough and the community that you're joining tonight. Even though this is not an information session about Breakthrough, we're going to get into the topic in just a second. Before I do that, first off, we're celebrating a Breakthrough. It is Teacher Appreciation Week. So congratulations. Thank you to all of you who are teachers who've been bending over backwards in the last year to make education happen. Thank you so much. And also, we're celebrating the class of 2021 as of May 1st. So many of those students have signed their letters of commitment to the colleges or universities they'll attend. So congratulations to all of you who might be a graduate or have a graduate in your life. It's a really momentous date, May 1st. So congratulations. So a bit about Breakthrough. Since 2002, Breakthrough Silicon Valley has been working in San Jose to address educational inequity from a couple different angles. The first angle is that we work directly with students who will be the first generation of their families to attend college, and work with them and their families in a free year-round 7-year program that sets them on their path to their college dreams. The second angle we approach educational inequity from is by inspiring a really diverse group of young people to be educators, to be change makers in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And we know at Breakthrough that our work is made all more powerful when we bring together our various communities and our networks together in pursuit of that shared goal of equity in education. And that is why we're here tonight. This for us is a big tent moment to bring together our communities to engage in what is a really important and timely conversation about what is happening with college education post COVID-19. And we brought a really tremendous panel of experts who will share your thoughts with you tonight. So Breakthrough, by the numbers, in San Jose, we support over 500 students in a long-term program that's 7 years. And on their path to college. And the program, it stitches together academic and emotional, social emotional skill building, individualized college advising, family engagement and education. And starting this year, our program extends through the first year of college to support students through their college transition. And we also have, through our summer teaching fellowship, really a second to none opportunity for young people to try their hand at becoming educators. And that is really showcased in our summer program, which teaches our middle school students all of these great enrichment and academic opportunities. So we'll hope that you want to stay connected with Breakthrough if you're new to us after this event. And at the conclusion, I'll come back and I'll share some ways that you can stay connected. So that said, I am really excited for tonight's panel. And in just a second, I'm going to invite our esteemed moderator, Clay Hensley, to take the stage. But before that, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. One is we'll save about 15 minutes towards the end of the session for Q&A. And we're going to handle Q&A through Zoom chat. So throughout the panel, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will take note. Or you can PM me directly in Zoom if you know how to do that, and I'll take note of that. We're going to do our best to address as many of the kinds of questions we get in that 15-minute session. We ask that you stay on mute for the entirety of the event. We're a big group, and so we want to minimize interruptions. And then just as a reminder, we are recording this session. Lastly, before I hand it over, I want to thank personally Clay, our moderator, all of our panelists, Adam, Anna, and Adele, as well as David Joyner for your help in putting this panel together. We're really excited. I know this is going to be valuable. So I will now pass it to our moderator, Clay Hensley, who will take us into the next step.
Thank you, John. What a great What a great introduction. And it's such a pleasure. It's a privilege. It's an honor to work with you and your team, Priyanka, Tamaya, and the entire Breakthrough staff. Your mission is shared by all of us and our panelists, and we want to give you valuable insights about such a timely topic. I feel like I'm coming home, at least virtually. My first job as an educator was at Serramonte Del Rey High School in the Jefferson Union School District in Daly City, California. This was way back in the early 90s. So you can tell by my gray hair that I've been around education for a bit. I like to think of it more like Anderson Cooper, but I'm typically more like Steve Martin, but I don't play banjo. So again, my name is Clay Hensley. I have worked in education for more than 3 decades, most recently at the College Board, and now I'm working as a consultant. And I've also had the pleasure of working with all 3 of these wonderful panelists, Adele Brumfield, Adam Sapp, and Anna Homayoun, on numerous occasions through State Department grants, through organizations like IC3 and other essential work. And I'm going to leave it up to them to tell their own stories and talk about their journey in higher education. I'm going to start with Adele. Adele, please tell your story.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks to the organization for inviting me here tonight. I want to just start by saying I was a first generation low income college student, but it was back in the day. And back in the day, there just weren't the resources that are available to students coming up these days. And so I just feel that you all are already so far ahead of me. But I grew up in the Midwest. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is my hometown. And I'm going to just take a second to shout out Milwaukee Bucks. Y'all can't, you can't get to me, so go Bucks. But I had the opportunity to go to college through one of the federal TRIO programs. And I went to college at Marquette University through a program called Educational Opportunity, designed for people like me who really had promise, who had aspiration and potential, but really didn't understand what it meant to navigate the college space. And so I had the opportunity also after that to go to graduate school at Michigan State University. And I really learned early on that education was the key. Education was the thing that I believe was going to change my life. My first job was in admissions at my alma mater at Marquette. I've had the opportunity to work in admissions also at Denison University, a small liberal arts college in Central Ohio. I went to the University of Chicago and worked there. I worked as director of admissions at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And now, for the last 5 years, I've been so proud to call University of California, San Diego my home. And so it's just an example of the path and the journey. And I didn't set out to do any of these things, but education really put me on a great path. And so let me just tell you a couple of things about UC San Diego. One, I mentioned we're on the shores of La Jolla, southernmost campus of the University of California system. We're a young school, only been around 60 years. And one of the things that's important to us is really thinking about how do we help discover new things and how do we think about breakthroughs in a way. And so this is a place where people come who are curious, who are interested in finding a way and a new thing. And also, if you have multiple interests, we can accommodate you. Some people know us just for the sciences, but we have great programs at arts and humanities and social sciences. And I could go on, but I know I'm on the clock here. So let me just tell you one other thing. As we think about this time going through the pandemic, and it's been challenging for everybody, no matter your station and situation, but I've been really proud of our campus. And one of the things that really helped us is that we have expert people who were on the cutting edge of science, really helping us think about how we can manage the pandemic. We made testing available to students. So were able to house more than 10,000 students on our campus. So I'm gonna leave you with that. We're ready to go. We're ready to get back in business. And we really hope that you will join us sometime in the future. Back to you, Clay.
Adele, I absolutely loved how you weaved in the mission, vision, and values of Breakthrough into your story and into the real identity, that UC San Diego holds. Adam, I'm going to ask you to make that same link. Adam, please.
Thank you very much, Clay. It's always tough to go after someone as fantastic and well-known as Adele, but I am going to try. It's really, really great to be here, everybody. My name is Adam Sapp. I'm the Assistant Vice President and Director of Admission at Pomona College. I, too, actually grew up in the Midwest, in the state of Ohio. I'm a rural kid, grew up in a farm town in central Ohio, very, very small town. I was really one of a very few number of students in my high school who attended a four-year college. I am a first-generation student. I went to Kenyon College. I majored in history at Kenyon, and then after Kenyon, spent many years working in the Claremont McKenna College admissions office, which is just across the street if you look at the picture behind me. After several years at Claremont McKenna, I went on to graduate school at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I then spent 5 years working at Princeton University, where in the last few years of that job, I oversaw international admissions, which is where I met Clay, and then moved to Pomona College, where I became director in June 2015, and I've now been in that role ever since. And, you know, my point of view, as I think is mission aligned with both Breakthrough and Pomona, is that access to first generation students, to low income students, to students from under-resourced high schools, this is key to making higher education work in this country. And Pomona is on the forefront as a liberal arts institution located in Claremont, California, which is about 35 miles east of Los Angeles here in Southern California, is an institution committed to diversity, access, and equity in all forms. And we are very proud to be part of the Claremont Colleges, which includes 4 other Claremont colleges. We are known as the Claremont Consortium. And the 5 of us are part of the liberal arts colleges of the West. Many don't think of the liberal arts when they think of the West Coast, but there are actually quite a few very strong and incredible liberal arts institutions on the West Coast. Pomona is one of them. We are national, we are global in all ways, and we too have many different majors and programs. They're going to challenge and push you in so many ways. And in fact, I will connect to Adele because one of our alums, Mike Budenholzer, Pomona class of 1992, is the current head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. How's that, Adele, for a connection? So I'll end there and just say the commitment to access and diversity is real, and I'm super excited to jump into tonight's conversation. Clay.
Thank you, Adam. Anna, you're next.
Sure. Well, how can you go after these two wonderful people and educators? I am Anna Homayoun, and I have worked with students on executive functioning, organization, time management, and the college application process for now 20 years. My story is that I grew up for the first 12 years in rural Connecticut. My parents immigrated to the United States in the 1970s into Bridgeport, Connecticut. And then we moved to the Silicon Valley when I was 13 years old. And that was probably the biggest culture shock of my life, which is what I often say. And I went to Duke University. So I spent time on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and I now do a lot of work in North Carolina, which I'll talk about in a second. So my work is directly with students, but also in schools. So I started Green Ivy Educational Consulting in 2001. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. But I also, in 2018, started Luminaria Learning, which is a nonprofit initiative, and we developed the Life Navigator middle school program, which is really key for thinking about what are the skills that kids need for opportunity and access to take hold, and for them to transition into whatever secondary school and then post-secondary experiences that they choose. I did a great deal of research on economic mobility and education, particularly in Charlotte, which was ranked 50 out of 50 in terms of economic mobility by the Harvard Opportunity Project, and really found that middle school was this key time, that it was the first time you could be friends with many people that your parental network or caregiver network wouldn't know, and the last time before high school classes might really change opportunities and outcomes in the post-secondary experience. So This has been an amazing past year. We developed this weekly advisory program. We implemented it in Charlotte, and we adapted everything for remote and hybrid learning. So our work around that is really key and aligned with Breakthrough. And how do we help all students have opportunity, access, and success at all levels and feel as though they belong in every single room possible? So with that, I'll turn it back to Clay.
Thank you, Anna. And really pleased that you're with us to make that bridge, not only just to the secondary school side, but as you said, scaffolding up through middle school, where I'm sure we have parents with even younger kids that are wondering what they should be doing now. And those are some of the things we're going to address. So as we move this discussion forward, we're going to start by talking about what's going on with college access and admissions now, in this tumultuous upheaval of a year, where we see things going. And then we'll move on to some actionable insights and perspectives that we hope that you as a parent can be able to apply to the advice and guidance that you give your students. And with that, I'm going to turn to you first, Adam. And many parents may feel that it's more difficult to get into college now than when they applied to college years ago. How do you encourage the Breakthrough community to think about making the right match, the best fit between students and universities? Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I might just, first of all, affirm and acknowledge that feeling. It probably is harder to get into many kinds of universities across the country if you're thinking about universities across the country as being a very small sort of a select band of universities across the country. But I will bust the myth and say that all universities are selective, because they're not. The average selectivity in the United States is definitely not in the single digits. And if you were to believe the media, that might actually be something that you would take away from reading the newspapers and the headlines. And that is not true. And so while there are definitely changes in the profile of the highly selective institutions and the mid-selective institutions, that is not the whole story of American higher education. And one of the things that I think is definitely true is that for many institutions, particularly as we think about a generation ago toward, and we compare that to today, there are so many more opportunities for college and university study across the country. There's a lot of attention and focus on this at the high school level and with organizations like Breakthrough. And the idea that you have to do this alone is definitely not an idea that I hope you take away from tonight. One of the things that I think is so fundamentally different is the opportunity for support and engagement if you're willing to seek it out in some cases, and also if you're sort of willing to be open to accepting that support through the many organizations that exist, such as Breakthrough. And so I do think that while there is a sense that if you sort of do a light touch review of what's happening, it's sort of easy to believe the crazy. But just beneath that, there's a whole lot of the process that actually hasn't changed too much. And I know we're going to talk about holistic review. We're going to talk about fit and match. We're going to talk about priorities when it comes to you and your kids and how you have that conversation in the family. But at the end of the day, university attendance and getting that bachelor's degree remains really, really fundamental to success as you think about economic opportunity, professional school opportunity. College is as important as ever.
Adele, how do you think about match in terms, coming from the public side? What can you add to that?
Sure. I'll start with also affirming what Adam said, this idea that it is harder. And again, I think it is about perception. And every time I talk with a parent, anybody who's gone to college or knew somebody who went to college, everybody thinks it's different. And every alumni I talked to said, I could never get in today, right? So that is kind of universal from their perspective. And I think part of it is maybe like me, they see students today doing so much more than we did when we were coming up. You know, the access to this program, the opportunity to do research or summer events and all those sorts of things. We didn't really do those things back in the day. So I think some of it is about the framing. I think also, though, when this point about the opportunities that we have in American higher education are much broader than people imagine. And I think if you're someone who gets caught up in rankings and position, you would be led to believe, like Adam was saying, that there are only a couple hundred schools. There are thousands of universities, great universities in the country. And so when I traveled on behalf of the US State Department, and that's one of the ways I work with Clay, I was out there around the world talking to people about two-year colleges, liberal arts colleges, regional colleges and universities that are public, Hispanic serving institutions, historically Black institutions. So there's so many possibilities. And so when I think about this from the vantage point of being within the University of California, I absolutely understand that people are like, whoa, y'all get so many applications. How will I ever find my way through? But one of the things that I always encourage students to do is really to think about you as a unique person and not about all the other people, because they don't bring to the table what you bring. They don't bring your specific curiosity, your story, information about your grit, how you see the world. And so I always approach things like, I am the best, I'm unique, and it's just my job to tell people that and to show up. And so that is something else that we're going to talk about today. So the thing I'll leave with is, don't be discouraged if you look at the record numbers of applications that one school or another gets, because sometimes I see students just totally shut down. They're like, they'll never pick me. But what I'm saying is, yes, they can pick you. And so we're going to talk with you today about how do you shore up your story so that you can really present yourself in the way that allows you to shine.
And Anna, I know you have some insights there. So how do you talk to your students and their families about how they start this process and look at those multitude of opportunities and start to narrow and focus so that their story fits into the narrative? Their story fits, yeah.
Well, here's the thing, and these were great things to jump off of. My first thing is helping students create a really great high school experience, right? And one of the things the pandemic did was provide, whether we wanted it or not, a pause, an opportunity for reflection, and this sense of potential community in a different way than we saw before. We had students, as Adele said, so many kids are doing so much today. And for many of them, they may be doing almost too much or thinking that they need to do all of these things to check the box. My goal is to help them step back and figure out, who are you? What makes you thrive? What's important to you? And how can you be an engaged member of your school and greater community? And so when the pandemic shut down schools, the questions I asked to students were really around that, right? What are ways you can get involved in your school or greater community? What are 2 to 5 ways that, are things you want to learn or spend time on or you're interested in? Because now they could go online and learn the guitar or hip hop dance or all these things. And they didn't have some of the scheduling conflicts or overrun things that were happening before. So for a lot of kids, it was this opportunity to develop their own blueprint in a new way. And I want that to continue. The other piece is to really look beyond this concept of these preconceptions of what a quote unquote good school is, right? I always hear from families, I'm applying to this school because it's a good school. Well, tell me why. And I'll give you a great example. I just had a meeting with a student from New York not too long ago. And she said, she gave me her list of schools. And it was kind of like on Sesame Street, where you're like, 2 of these are not like the other. And I asked her, I said, can you tell me why these schools are on your list? You say you want these qualities. These schools don't have these things. In fact, they're great schools, but have none of these qualities. And she said, oh, well, my friend goes there and likes it. And I said, well, or I heard, and then the other one was, I heard it was a good school. And I said, let me get you back to looking at who you are as a unique student. and where is the place that you are going to thrive. And that's many different places, by the way. There's no one place. So that's the other thing. I always am concerned when parents or students are like, it is this one or bust. And I always say, you know what, I applied early decision somewhere and I was rejected early decision, and it was the best thing that happened to me. But so we don't know how the path is going to change. And if we look at this as this opportunity for exploration in high school, and the personal statement, which I'll talk about later on tonight, as this opportunity for self-reflection, which is what we do in our office. I can tell you over 20 years, I was thinking about it this morning, how many kids who are now adults in their 20s and 30s have come back to me and said, that personal statement was the first time I really put on the table, this is who I am. And some of them have said, you know, I am now this, and I'm doing what I said I was going to do in this personal statement, because it wasn't just let me transactionally do this to get into college. It's let me reflect on who I am. Let me develop my uniqueness and let me share that in my application process. And that comes through. I can tell from my perspective, but I know that Adam and Adele can probably say that too. They can read that through in a student's story when they convey that. So that's what we do, really.
And so that's a great start in terms of, you know, shaping the list, in terms of the students really looking at what the great opportunities they are for them. Adele, there's been so much upheaval that we mentioned, you know, during this cycle. I'd like to start with you, just from the perspective of UC San Diego. What are the core elements that you're looking for within the application that defines, your acceptance, Adele?
So thanks. I would say that some of the core elements have not changed during the pandemic, because these are educational institutions. We're about learning. We're about helping students grow, discover, develop. And so at the heart of that is really the foundation of what students are doing. And I love that Anna was talking about middle school, you know, trying to think about what you're doing, the choices you're making, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. And for those students who are a little bit farther along, don't give up on that senior year. Don't just say, hey, I've just met minimum requirements, I'm good to go, hang out at the beach. No, no, no. So it's really about the choices, the foundation, stretching yourself within the courses that are available, working with your school counselor, working with other people who can support your journey. And then I love also what Anna said about the personal statement and self-reflection and discovery. Some of the times I talk with students and they take courses because, I'm sorry, parents, they say, my parents told me I had to take this because they want me to be a doctor, but you know, I hate the sight of blood, but I really love music. I love writing. And so they neglected sometimes to take some of the courses in their schedule that would allow them to thrive. But at UC San Diego and other places, the core really is the academic record, what you're doing over time, and also how are you performing? Now, I know there are times where you thrive in courses, there are times where maybe you stumble, but it's always important to get back up and to continue to do your best. And I want to tie something in, and I saw something in the chat about office hours. And so this is something that really applies to both high school and college that helps you strengthen the profile, is know when to ask for help and not be ashamed in asking for help. And I see that a lot of first-gen low-income students are fearful of that because they're like imposter syndrome. I don't want people to know that I don't know. And so then they just step back and they don't take advantage of opportunity. But I'm getting off track. So let me just get back to the question real quick. So really the rigor of the courses, we look at writing. At the University of California, we call them personal insight questions. Just like Anna was saying, a way where you can tell your story, tell us about what we don't see in the courses that you've taken, about your aspirations, or even if you've overcome some challenges. I'll say that those who've been watching the news know that University of California, we're not using testing right now. SAT or SAT is part of the process. But fortunately for us, we at UC San Diego already employed holistic admissions, where we're looking at 13 different factors, all of these things to help us understand you. So the point really is is that in a place like UC San Diego, you're more than a number. It's a collection of the various experiences you had, but at the root of it really is what you're doing in the classroom and how you're performing.
I hear you. And as you take that evidence, Adam, can you talk a bit about how you contextualize it? And then I would like for you to inventory some of the testing policies that we see. But first, I'd like you to talk about that idea of context and evidence.
Sure. So, one of the things that Adele talked about when talking about the rigor of a curriculum is that we are looking at grades. We're looking at academic courses as well. So one of the things that I think is really important is that when you think about this academic core, for the most part in admissions, that means math, science, social studies, foreign language, in English. Sometimes it may mean arts courses, or in a religious context, it might mean a religious studies course if you're at a religious high school or parochial school. But generally, it's those 5 core: math, science, foreign language, social studies, and English. Ideally, you should be in those courses, some combination of those courses, for all 4 years to the extent it's possible, and you should be challenging yourself a little more each year. So I like to think of this as rigor that evolves. So you do well, you have the ability to challenge yourself a little more, then you sort of step it up a little bit as you move through high school. That is going to be different for every student. And I really resist the idea that there's a number of AP courses you have to take, or a number of honors courses you have to take. That's not true. This is for the student, and you should speak with your counselor as you think about rigor. But the simple way to evaluate rigor is to read the high school profile. And parents, if you haven't read your high school profile, this is your homework. You need to find your school's profile and you need to read it. And you should read it because it contains a lot of information that admissions officers care deeply about. Specifically, it contains information on the curriculum. And this allows us to evaluate rigor. And the question is, what did you have the opportunity to take? And what did you take? And then how did you do? And those are the fundamental building blocks of any kind of transcript assessment in a holistic context. When it comes to testing, there are really 3 different policies. And I'm not going to sort of go into too much detail on what they are, but I will say you should ask the question about the policies and know the differences. There's test flexible, there's test optional, and there's test blind. And many institutions have now moved to some version of these three policies. Yes, there are a few institutions out there that are still requiring testing in some form, or may have recommended testing for some programs within a university, but the test optional options that exist in higher education today are far greater in number than they ever have been as a result of the pandemic. And I think that will remain true, at least in the short to medium term. We'll sort of see what happens. But the questions you need to ask are you test optional, test flexible, or test blind? Test flexible means there is some kind of context by which they might prefer a test. So there might be a reason to have a test. It might not necessarily be an SAT or an ACT. It might be some other kind of test, but they're flexible about it. Test optional means that you are given the choice. Test optional is usually considered a choice policy. The student has the choice to submit a test if they have it. If they don't have it, obviously they don't have the choice, so they're not going to submit it. And so there won't be a test for some applicants. There will be a test for other applicants, and colleges and universities figure that out. Test blind means even if you have a perfect ACT or a perfect SAT, they're not going to consider it. They are blind to the test no matter the applicant. And so those are the 3 policies, and that's kind of the bigger picture when it comes to testing policy.
And Adam, so Pomona, to be clear, would be optional.
Yes.
For now, and at least for the next 3 years, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And for the UC system, as Adele mentioned, they are not looking, they would be test free or test blind, as you said, and like the flexible policies would expect some kind of external testing, but with, again, that option of choice, things like IB, A-level, APs. And I'd like to shift a bit, and I'm so glad you answered Emily's question already in the chat. And then I think we've addressed a couple of the testing questions that have come up. Anna, before we move to open question and answer, I want to ask you to talk a bit about financing. This is another elephant in the room related to what many parents are thinking about. Their financing college seems more complex than ever. What are some resources available to students and parents that you would recommend that are out there for them to start thinking about researching how they pay for college?
I think, let me turn it over 1 second to Adam, because he had a couple websites that he wanted to also bring in. So I'll have him start, and then I'll offer my perspective of what I've seen too.
That's fine.
Sure. So, I think the bigger picture around the questions, and again, I want to arm you as parents and students with questions. You want to ask the question, are you need blind or are you need aware? Because this will tell you a little bit about how the institution will assess your ability to pay vis-a-vis your admissibility. So one of the websites I like to use, because I think that the policies are one thing, but what I would say, arming yourself with data and information, that's the other thing, right? And so there is a website that I'll drop into the chat. It's called My Intuition. It is a 6-question cost calculator for students to estimate their expenses. A small group, mostly private institutions, belong to this consortium of schools that use the quick cost calculator. There's another tool called the net price calculator, which all institutions have, and by law needs to be on the website. Does that help you, Anna? Can you take it from there? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I wanted you to join with My Intuition. One of the things that a lot of families have seen, particularly this year, is that it may be a great option to go to a 2-year institution, particularly in California, and transfer. And I was just speaking with a student about this last night. They were looking at a community college that had a really high transfer rate. But not only that, a lot of the community colleges have a transfer admission guarantee program where you can sign a contract, and if you take certain classes with a certain grade with certain universities that include certain UCs, that include certain private colleges, you'd be surprised. Go on their websites and see what that looks like, because that could be a much less expensive way, but also not because of what's happened over the last 18 months. Not every student is ready to go away right now. I've seen this for years where, and I'm not going to, say, but a lot of boys, right, at 18, weren't ready to go away. And there's many times that I've said, maybe a year or two in a community college setting is helpful. And that's actually really changed in terms of building those executive functioning skills, in terms of where they are in brain development, becoming more focused on what they're interested in, which just makes their overall college experience better. And also from a financial standpoint, if you have a student that really, they're not ready to go away for a lot of reasons, it may be social, it may be emotional, it may also be just things going on in your family or caregiver situation. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that we all know that the sticker price is not always the final price, in that, there are many different ways that students can get merit aid, get financial aid that will change how much things actually cost. And one thing for parents of seniors right now, if you've received financial aid packages, back to Adele's point about people not asking for help, I often find this too, students who can really benefit from more financial aid, or there's been a change in finances this year. It's a really important time to be very specific about what those changes are and go back to institutions and say, hey, can you work with me here? Because right now, after May 1st, Adam, Adele, correct me if I'm wrong, you now know who is coming with what aid they've taken. And so there's different opportunities, and every school is different and every time's different. So I think it's really helpful for families to also sit down with students and have real honest conversations. How much is this going to cost? And what does that really look like long term? You know, my goal is always to help every student come out as close to debt free as possible. And so I sit down with students and we really talk about it, and we figured out what does that look like for you and your family, and if that's, you know, what are the differences in the different options that you have. You know, I had students this year that got into 3 schools that I would say are academically pretty similar, but they were going to end up costing a lot different amounts of money, and we talked about that. And I think, you know, 10 or 15 years ago or 25 years ago, parents and caregivers weren't necessarily having those open conversations in the same way. And I think it's a good time to do that really honestly with students, so they see, okay, and this is a value to me. This is where I'm going to show up. And this is really important to me. Does that help?
Very much. Thank you, Anna. And in that developmental process, you know, we're moving toward question and answer, but we've gotten into a lot of granular detail here with some great resources that you can take and apply to the process of helping guide your students. Adele, I want to widen this out a bit. I want the conversation before we move to question and answer. And as our audience here is looking to support their child's aspirations, and what resources or what role would you advise that they take? What's the kind of prism or lens that they should be looking at in the key role of being a caring adult and guiding them through the process? Can you help with that sort of advice and perspective, Adele?
Sure, love to. I love the word you just used as guide. How do adults help guide rather than be out in front and have students follow? So I think that this is also a really important point in a student in their development, that they're taking some ownership over their future, being confident in what they think or what their interests are, even if it creates some conflict in the household. And so I think what's important for adults is to learn to listen and not always transfer your own goals onto students or your own fears onto students. And so sometimes I find that parents are limiting possibilities for their students unknowingly. Now, that's not to say that there aren't real barriers and framework. And I want to also amplify what Anna just mentioned about money and talking about financing, because sometimes, I mean, I've seen over the years parents crying in my office, you know, right before May 1, because they told their student they can go wherever they want to go, wherever they could get in, but they hadn't thought through what does that really mean and whether the family could afford it. And so if there are non-starters in your household, I think it's important to have those conversations really early on. I also think, and this gets back to writing and students really showing up and presenting their story, we're kind of smart people in admissions. And we can tell the difference between an aspiration young collegian and someone who's been around the block 25, 30 times. And so this is, again, where you want to provide guidance, but not over help. So basically, I'm just saying, we know parents, aunties, grandmas, uncles, we know if y'all wrote this versus the voice of a younger person. So I love, again, this concept of guiding.
Adele, can I just quickly tell you, do you know how many times I've told people this sounds like a 50-year-old woman wrote it? Yeah. And not like I'll see the final version, and then a week later I'll see, oh, this has been revised. It sounds nothing like the child who loved whatever. So yes.
Yeah, and I think they think they're really clever. I'm just saying, y'all are not that clever, so don't do that.
Absolutely. And Adam, yeah, as we move to question and answer, I'd like for you to close this section with where you think they can help best with that exploration and that journey, Adam.
So here's sort of what I would say. when your student, I mean, some of you have a kid who's driving, and when your student was driving, you sat in the passenger seat, and you hopefully, if you were not that mom or that dad or that aunt, you didn't say too much, right? Because you knew if you did, it might distract the student and the young person, and you didn't really want to make them crash because you're telling them to go left or go right. You were patient. And if there was something that was bad that was about to happen, you took the wheel, or you told them to stop or to not go through that yellow light, right? Like, you didn't let them create an emergency, but you made sure that they had the reins of that car and were getting you from point A to point B. That's your role in the college process. Be a really good advocate passenger. Don't take the wheel, don't take the reins, don't make the decisions. Think about this as a partnership, because here's what will happen. If you do this well, the 16 or 17-year-old sitting next to you right now watching this program is going to go through a really important transformational process. And when they become that 18-year-old walking across their high school graduation, getting that diploma, there's going to be something about them that you don't recognize. And that's a good thing, because it means they're growing up. And you are going to be able to see them as this young adult, this good decision maker, because you've given them the space to make the good decisions that you have raised them to make. And so I think part of the challenge in parenting is knowing when to push and when to step back and just let your kid go. And everybody's a little different. You know your kid better than anybody else, so you got to do it the way you need to do it. But resist the urge to take the reins. Make sure that the student is doing the advocacy. And if they ask for help, of course, be there to provide it. But if they don't ask for help, don't nose in and offer it every day. You let them make sure that they're leading their process.
Well, what a great transition point. So now we can shift and bring John back. And I really like that, Adam, when we talk about, you know, the process in which the students will come to this decision about college is just one of many decisions that that decision prepares them for. So that's not the ultimate decision. It's not what they're really preparing for. It's that future. John, you've been taking questions throughout. You've been getting a consensus of what's out there. In the next 10 minutes or so, let's open it up for questions. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And Priyanka, we can take the slides down. So I would like for us to start with this first question that we've talked about fit with the panel. And the question is, what is the best way to find schools that fit? You talk about things that make you thrive. How and where do you go to sift through all of the universities and colleges to find that fit? So I think, Adele, you had a really interesting comment on this. So maybe, do you mind if I direct this question to you, and maybe the other panelists can chime in?
Sure. So I think fit is often viewed very narrowly, like there's a place, it has a thing, and I better know what it is and sign up. But I like to look at fit a little bit more broadly and thinking about, as a start, this self-discovery, this notion of who am I? What am I interested in? What are my values? Do I love 10 things that I might want to study, right? So I might find a place that could offer those 10 things if I change my mind. Is there this idea of a financial fit? We just talked about that. Is there financial aid? Are there grants to support me? Are there scholarships? And shout out to athletes who may be looking for athletic scholarships as a place. Can they play their sport and thrive in that? But it's this idea that fit can be much broader and in a lot of different places. And so I think it goes back to some of the earlier comments from my colleague that there are lots of great places where you could find a home and you could fit. And I think what I have worried about over the years, you know, having been a first generation student, is that I didn't even know what fit even meant. So when I heard that, or I heard somebody talk about it, I just kind of was like, I probably didn't ask that question. So part of my advice is coming from, I didn't always know the questions to ask. And so it's just this idea that there's fit is meaning, basically means finding a place where you could find a home, or many places where it can allow you to grow and prosper. And so I'm hoping, John, I'm getting at some of that. And I know my colleagues are going to help me fill in some gaps.
That's great, Adele. Thank you. Anna or Adam, I wonder if you could just chime in with, where do you send people to go start finding the colleges and universities to start looking at? What are the resources out there?
Well, so one of the things that I do, or how I look at this, and this is important for parents and caregivers on the call to think about, is, 8 to 12 schools in June of their junior year, if they can come up with a list and you look at qualities of schools. So you could start with something like the Fisk Guide to Colleges. There are online, depending on what your school uses. This is where you can look at the counseling center at your school, public, private. They all have search options where you can go through and you can be very specific about what the qualities are, size, location, all these things, and just use it as this opportunity to explore. Now, I know that a lot of people haven't been able to get on college campuses in the last year. One other thing that I often recommend, and no matter where you live, hopefully within driving distance, there may be one, and if you live in the Bay Area, we have this, right? So let's focus on the Bay Area for a second. You could drive to a big public institution, you could drive to a small private institution, you could drive to every sort within 2 to 3 hours. And I don't mean that you need to apply to that school, but what I do mean is I want you to get on that campus and see what it feels like to you as a student, and say, hey, you know what, this university, this setting, I could see myself here, right? And because of these qualities. And that's what I always tell when students go to visit a school, I want them to take photos on their phone. They have the phone, they should use it. I want them to take notes for themselves right afterwards. What are the qualities? Because then they can go to others, they can go and say, what are these qualities? A school counselor can help too. Like, I know that there are a lot of digital options, but I also worry that sometimes you get into the weeds of these like chat rooms and they're not that accurate, right? It's kind of like asking a seventh grader, a fellow seventh grader, for relationship advice. That's probably not the number one place to go. So thinking about, where are the places, are they, college counselors at your school? Are there databases? I personally like the Fisk Guide to Colleges. There are a number of other ones out there that are really great. But when you look at, get yourself on some campuses, and in the fall when it's safe and safer, or it feels safer, and maybe students are back, that's also, you look around, you say, okay, can I see myself here? That's a real question. And I think I've had students who said, oh, I want to go to this school, good school, quote unquote. And then they get on a campus and they're like, oh, that's not the place that I feel like I'm going to thrive. It's a great place, but maybe not my place. And so my look is at 8 to 12 schools. This is why I wanted to get back to this, John, though, because a lot of times students right now, Adam and I spoke about this the other day, where, they're just applying to as many as possible. And they're saying, let me see who lets me in. And I don't want students to do that, because that is just a waste of time and energy. I want you junior year to look at, what are 8 to 12 schools? If you got into any one of those on your list, you would go and you would be thrilled. And so that requires a lot of front end research. But I have done this for 20 years, and I can say students end up happier. It takes less stress. And then they're able to really apply to these schools by telling their stories and how they match what the school is really offering. And so I think it's a lot more effective of a way to look at schools.
Thank you, Anna. So there's another question, I think, very good question from a parental point of view. Could someone share more about the personal statement? So I'm wondering, Anna, we just heard from you. I'm wondering, Adam, perhaps you could talk about what the personal statement is and your advice for supporting a young person and creating one that has impact. And Anna, maybe you can chime in on that as well.
Sure. A couple tips. I'll keep this really quick. Your best writing is your rewriting. Your first draft is never going to work. So just already make sure you're building in time to produce writing that is what I usually like to say, writing is a process, not a divine event. And so you don't get done with the essay and boom, it's ready. You have to spend time with it and think about writing and communication. And the other side of that, of course, is that most colleges who require personal statements are going to expect you to produce a couple hundred words. So maybe 300, 400, 500 words, depending upon the length of that personal statement. It is a narrative. It's not a bullet point list. It's not necessarily a biography, though sometimes they can be biographical. And so most people don't tend to think in terms of their story, but it is helpful as you think about the personal statement that you think about the narratives, the experiences, the ways in which you've learned. And this gets back to one of the common themes, which is, surely Socratic in all ways, the unexamined life is not worth living. You need to know a little bit about yourself, and you need to know a little bit about the things you value and who you are and what you value. If those guide the majority of your writing in a college essay, you're going to be just fine.
So really quickly, one thing I'll say is a lot of people don't realize that some topics that they have never even thought of tell a lot about themselves. I'll give you an example from this year. I was doing um, an essay class with the students from the Boys and Girls Club near my office, and so I ask a lot of different questions on this questionnaire, and I'm sort of like, they don't even know what questions I'm asking, but the exercises come out. And one of the things that came out for this one student was that she had carpooled for 10 years with her dad, her mom. They had taken two cars so they could get the carpool lane. It was a whole thing. They stopped at the gas station in Menlo Park so she could go to this one school because her mom worked in the district. And it was a whole thing. Like, she started explaining to me and she became really enlivened. I said, this would be a really good essay topic. You have lots to say on it. And she had been so stressed about what was she going to write about. And honestly, a lot of it just came out. Adam is absolutely right. Please do not think you're going to write a good essay at 8 p.m. the day before it's due. It will not be good. I have written 3 books. I can tell you it's rewriting. But the other piece to think about is back to the parent, this parent participation or caregiver. I have kids who their parents never read the essay. In fact, last year I had a student who I read the essay and I almost cried. I did cry because it was about how it was really hard living in his older brother's shadow and freshman year and not being that great of an athlete. But he said, absolutely under no circumstances is my mom going to read this. She would make me really upset. It was a fabulous essay. Kid got in everywhere he applied. But the mom trusted me. And this is the thing. I'm not saying you hire someone. I'm actually saying make sure there's someone an adult in your child's life that you trust that can also guide them in this process, because it may just be too close for you all to handle. And that's okay. Outsource that. There's an aunt, there's a cousin, there's a family friend. And so that's what I would say around thinking about those personal statements as well.
I want to just say real quick, though, it is helpful to have somebody put eyes on it, because there are times over the years where I've read things and I said to myself, I know her mama does not know that she just told all the family business, right? In this notion of I'm really just disclosing. So, you just may want to check it out.
So there's, with our last minute, and apologies to everyone, we'll go over just a little bit before we close, but I want to give Adam and Adele, there's a couple of more provocative questions. So I want pretty succinct answers. Adam, you first. One is about test optional. There's some skepticism that test optional really means optional. So in the most concise way possible, can you tell the parents that, yes, you mean it. They don't have to submit the test.
Sure. Testing was never driving decisions at most places, and it still does not drive decisions at most places. In a holistic context, at most of the schools that are using testing, there are some exceptions, but at most of the schools that are using testing, testing is one factor of many. It always has been one factor of many, and even in an optional world, if it's not there, there's still multi-factor review going on. So I think the challenge is that you always thought testing was driving decisions, and it never was in most contexts. So what you have to unpack is, if it wasn't, it still isn't. That doesn't mean that testing doesn't matter for those students who submit it. It means what you thought about testing was never true to begin with. And so you have to think about that when it comes to holistic review and a multi-factor review, because that is why we ask for many things, because students are many things. And in order to evaluate students well, we need many pieces.
That's perfect. And Adele and Adam, feel free to jump in, but this is a broader question that I think it's great to end on. It's close to my heart because in creating a community, in shaping your class and creating an atmosphere in which you can train or develop global citizens. There was a question related, it was directed at the UCs, but I also think it's relevant to all colleges. As you're creating those communities, Adele, Adam, how important is it that they come from more backgrounds and places, even if you want to help all California students grow and train? How important is it to have a diverse community from different backgrounds? I'll start with you, Adele.
Sure, it's extremely important. And I think the world is small, and it is important for our citizens of today to understand, contextually, that we are part of a greater whole. We're all humans on this earth. And so I think it's really important when we think about bringing in students from different backgrounds, and we define that very broadly. Not just California, but all parts of California. Californians from all backgrounds, Californians with a wide range of interests, as well as students who join us internationally, some coming directly from their home countries, some who've been here in the US already, and then everybody else across the great nation. And when we think about the learning environment, that students are together, diving deep into issues, thinking, being challenged about their ideas. These are things that are not just good for people as individuals, but they're good for us as a community. They're good for us as citizens, good for us as Americans. So it's absolutely critical and very important.
I would just add, there are some differences between public schools and private schools. This isn't one of them. Valuing difference is key to learning, and learning is core to what we do. So I can't think of a more simple way to put it than that.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end, John.
I agree. Thanks, Clay. Great. Well, I think the panelists, you've outdone yourselves. Thank you so much, Adam, Anna, and Adele, and Clay for your moderation. Audience, I invite you to, we normally stand up and applaud, but you can share an emoji, you can say thank you in the chat, you can stand up and clap at your home office if you wish. We're right there with you. But please just join me in thanking our panelists and our moderator, Clay, for an action-packed and great panel. Thank you so much. Adam, I love the analogy that you brought up of, teaching a 16-year-old or 15-and-a-half-year-old to drive. And the adult's role is to guide them and keep them out of emergency scenarios, and allow them autonomy, but within a certain parameters, and know where they're going. And reflecting on that, for a lot of our students who are first-gen students, breakthrough is that other entity in the passenger seat. When your family or a few people in your community have learned to drive, or have made their pathway to college that you're trying to do, you need to look at other resources. We all talked about the importance of asking for help. And that's just a role that Breakthrough plays in the lives of our students. And I think that's just a thought I'd like to close out with, and appreciate all of you, helping the Breakthrough community understand the nuances of college admissions in a much deeper way tonight. So for our audience, I hope this was valuable. Lots of questions that we didn't get to, already asking for more on the same topic. So maybe we'll have a command performance. But this was a pleasure. We're so glad all of you joined us. We hope that you'll consider staying connected with Breakthrough, either as a volunteer. Perhaps you can help tutor a middle school student, help them to develop study skills, or a high school student on their AP US history exam. Or maybe you can review a college personal statement to be that extra set of eyes that Adele talked about. So we're going to flash up in a second opportunities to volunteer, to come visit our programs. They'll be virtual this summer, but you can still check us out and see what our middle school programs are about. And the last thing is that we are a nonprofit that relies on financial contributions from folks. If you are so moved to help us do all the stuff that Anna and Adam and Adele talked about is so important, you're so moved to help us do that for our students, we'd welcome a contribution. We have a spring campaign right now that we're calling Learning Gains. We talk about learning loss so much. We're talking about learning gains at Breakthrough this summer. And our amazing board of directors is matching every gift up to $50,000 through May 31st. We have about $10,000 more to go to get the full match. So perhaps you can help us get there. So thank you very much. Tonight was amazing. Adam, thank you so much. Great to reconnect. Anna, always appreciate having you in the Breakthrough community. And Adele, welcome. Clay, fantastic job. Thank you so much. And from all of us at Breakthrough, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Guests, we're going to send a quick survey. We'd appreciate your answers. 3 questions, 1 and done. And we hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you so much.